Well, good morning to everyone, and welcome to State of the City with Mayor Ed Holder, presented by the London Chamber of Commerce. Now, it's my very great pleasure to introduce our musical introduction. Orlando Valencia and the Latin Element Dance Band is London, Ontario's premier Latin American band, and it's led by both Orlando Jr. and his father, Orlando Sr. Originally from El Salvador, they have made London, Ontario their beloved home for 37 years. Since then, they have been the leading voices in London and southwestern Ontario's diverse Latin American music scene, and have dedicated their lives to performing and sharing authentic, vibrant sounds of Latin America with all of us. Proud to call London their home, and we're proud to have them, this London duo plans to continue the work of keeping their culture alive through music and art, as well as adding just the right spice in our diverse and special Canadian experience. Orlando.
Mi divina Guajira, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, vamos Guajira, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Antes de morir yo quiero echar mi verso del alma. Guantanamera, ¿cómo? Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Antes de morir yo quiero echar mi verso del alma. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Tururú, ¿dónde va Miguel? Tururú, ¿dónde va Miguel? Tururú, ¿dónde va Miguel? Tururú, ¿dónde va Miguel? Guanta, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guanta, Guajira, Guanta, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guanta, Guajira, Guanta, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guanta, Guajira, Guanta, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guanta, Guajira. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Antes de morir yo quiero echar mi verso del alma. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Juega conguero, sabroso, Latinos in the house. Mi divina Guajira, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, 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 Guajira, Guantanamera.
Thank you so much. This marvelous performance was made possible by a new partnership that the Chamber is forging with the incredible team at the London Arts Council. Music will henceforth be a feature of our events as we work to create a more inclusive and enjoyable set of presentations. We want to help showcase all that is great about London. And to this end, we will be working with the London Arts Council to ensure that all of our events are graced with something as beautiful as what Orlando and his father offered us as a gift this morning. And if you want to book the Latin Element Dance Band, just give the Arts Council a call, or you can find Orlando Valencia on Facebook and Instagram. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Rhonda Hoya, who is the Executive Vice President Operations at Libro, and someone who we are very lucky to have on our board as an executive member of the Chamber of Council, Chamber of Commerce. So with that, Rhonda.
Good morning, and welcome to the State of the City Address. First, the London Chamber would like to acknowledge the history and the traditional territory and honor the long-standing relationships with the 3 local First Nations of this land and place in southwestern Ontario. The Attawandaran once settled this region with the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and this land served as their traditional hunting grounds. The 3 long-standing Indigenous groups within this geographical area are the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape. We would also like to recognize the first 3 First Nations communities neighboring the City of London: Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. The London Chamber of Commerce recognizes the inequities associated with colonization and are committed to working towards a just, inclusive, and vibrant community for all. Now, I also would like to thank Orlando and Orlando Senior for their performance this morning. They will be back at the end of the event as well, so please stay tuned. And as Graham noted, a special thanks to the London Arts Council for making that possible. As my last duty, I want to take the opportunity to introduce someone who rarely needs an introduction in the City of London, but we are going to give him one anyways. Mayor Ed Holder was sworn in as London's 64th mayor on December 1st, 2018. Prior to being elected to the City Council, he served as a Member of Parliament for London West from 2008 to 2015, and he was a Minister of Science and Technology from 2014 to 2015. Ed currently sits on the Strategic Priorities and Policies Committee for the London Police Services Board, the London Economic Development Corporations Board, the London Convention Centre Board, and the Western University Board of Governors. Prior to entering politics, he graduated right here from Western University and worked many years in the insurance industry, founding Ontario West Insurance in 1981, which a decade later merged with Stevenson and Hunt Insurance Brokers, and he served as their president until 2008. Community service and civic participation is deeply important to Ed. He has served on more than 40 not-for-profit and community organizations across the city. And he's called London home for almost 4 decades. During his time here in the city, Ed's focus has been twofold. 1, building successful, strong businesses, and 2, giving back to our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the Mayor of London, Ontario, Canada, Mr. Ed Holder.
Well, thank you very much, Rhonda. That was a very thoughtful introduction. And though I can't hear the gales of applause at the other end, I would like to acknowledge all of you who are here and responding to today's very special State of the City by remote, by Zoom. So thank you very much. Et bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, and thank you again. My thanks as well to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event as it has for the last 43 years. Let me acknowledge and commend Graham Henderson for his work in ensuring this remains the largest gathering of its kind in all of Canada, virtual or otherwise. We're grateful for the leadership that you, your team, the Chamber Board of Directors, and all the volunteers who provide such great support to London's business community. I get to say thank you, and it's extremely sincere. I'd like to acknowledge all the mayors and regional chairs who are in attendance, as well as MPs, MPPs, and First Nations chiefs, and all other dignitaries, all of you. There will be an acknowledgement at the end of this session more formally to say thank you to you. But let me also recognize the City of London workers. Allow me to do that with union executives and members, as well as our senior leadership team, led by City Manager Lynn Livingston. The support and cooperation we have enjoyed from each of you has been phenomenal, because you know you've demonstrated leadership, and you've demonstrated a resolve to serve our city with distinction. Similarly and equally important, my sincerest thanks to those with whom I have the pleasure to serve as part of London City Council. I'd like to give special recognition to Deputy Mayor Josh Morgan. I consider Josh a voice of reason and a pragmatist to the core, something that's increasingly rare in this political climate. He cares deeply about our city and the people who live here, and I'm grateful for his support. This, as we know, is the final state of the city before October's municipal election. And regardless of what voters decide, we know the next council will appear different from this one. It's important then for me to address my colleagues in this setting to celebrate their hard work and recognize their commitment to all Londoners. Because over the last 4 years, there have been debates and there have been divides. However, on the issues of greatest importance and of most significance, I'm extremely proud to say that this council is united. There's no division on climate change. There are no close votes when it comes to caring for London's most vulnerable. When it matters most, London City Councillors stand as one. And it is my honor to serve alongside of each of you, and your contribution to London will be felt long after this term is concluded. Where matters of time and calendar are concerned, I'd also note that Groundhog Day is next week. I point this out because everyone may feel as if they're playing starring roles in the famous movie of the same name. The calendar reads 2022, yet in many ways it represents a repetition of 2021 and 2020. Consider this. At last year's State of the City address, on that same morning, thousands of businesses were coming out of a nearly 7-week lockdown. 1 year later, on this day, a separate round of restrictions are due to end next week. You know, I described the state of our city last year as tired, anxious, weary, and frustrated. 1 year later, well, those descriptors still apply, although I'd add caring, determined, and resilient. Perhaps one more, exhausted. And truly, how could it be otherwise? COVID has dominated our lives on a daily basis for some 2 years now, and it continues to do so. This is unlike anything any of us have ever known. And after all we've been through, after all we've sacrificed individually and collectively, let's be blunt. Many aren't only exhausted, but perhaps most concerning, those who have done the right things and continue to do the right things may be left to wonder, well, what's the point? Does any of this really matter? But I'm here to tell you from my heart that it does matter. It matters more than you know. Those aren't just empty words or rhetoric. They're born out of fact and in lives saved. Because if not for you, you who have done the right things, the waves of infection and hospitalizations we've seen recently would have been exponentially worse. Without you, countless numbers of people would have lost their lives. Without you, these restrictions, soon set to expire, measured in weeks, would have undoubtedly been measured in months and longer. Our economy would have been in ruins and our healthcare system in a state of collapse. And you prevented that. And that's why doing the right thing does matter, even when it means enduring the slings and sneers from those who do otherwise. All of us should be exceptionally proud that London is among the top 5 most vaccinated jurisdictions in all of Ontario. And that pride should swell even further when we think of thousands of Londoners who have fought this battle on the front lines day after day. The grocery store staff, the delivery drivers, our restaurant staff, where restaurants have been hit so hard during this, our essential service workers, our first responders, and our healthcare heroes, and so many more who could and frankly should be mentioned, but time does not allow. Here's what I know. Omicron is subsiding, and by all indications, that decline should happen quickly. And when it does, this may well be remembered as the storm before the calm. That is my hope. However, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that hope is not a strategy, and therefore a strategy is required to ensure that hope is realized. To that end, I have 2 requests from our provincial and federal government partners. Number 1, unless or until we get serious about the unvaccinated, we can be certain that a future variant and the one after that will all but guarantee the same outcome. And so long as 1 out of 10 people refuse to take the most basic of precautions, our healthcare system will always be at risk of being overrun. Surgeries will be seriously delayed or canceled because those who overwhelm our hospital beds and intensive care units are overwhelmingly the unvaccinated. And it boils down to this. 90% of our society, those who have done the right things repeatedly for over 2 years, simply cannot be expected to continue doing the heavy lifting in perpetuity for the 10% who refuse to do the bare minimum. I don't have the legislative tools to effect a solution, but it's obvious to me where and to whom our efforts should be focused. My second request. There's an absolutely urgent need to begin a national conversation about healthcare capacity in Canada. This was an issue prior to COVID, and it's been the dominant issue throughout the pandemic. Canada ranks 41st out of 137 countries around the world when it comes to healthcare capacity, according to a recent analysis which includes nurses, specialists, physicians, and hospital beds per capita. It simply can't persist. The situation is especially stark in Ontario. Among Canadian provinces where these metrics are concerned, ours ranks at or near the bottom in every category. You know, we talk about our healthcare heroes. We love our healthcare heroes. But acts of heroism should not be required if these individuals had the proper supports as part of a system that's properly resourced. You know that London is home to the best healthcare facilities in Canada, along with some of the best researchers and medical innovators anywhere in the world. Brilliant minds like Dr. Chil Yong Kang and his team at Schulich are developing a new vaccine that shows early promise in producing stronger and longer-lasting immunity. We have unparalleled expertise and the capacity to make significant contributions to this vital discussion, assuming there are like-minded partners willing to do the same. This is a national conversation that cannot wait. We have done so much through this pandemic, but again, London is ready to play a leading role. In the short term, COVID will become manageable, treatable, and preventable. However, learning to live with it also means ensuring we learn from it and applying the lessons it has taught. Chief among those is the value of being proactive rather than reactive. That, in essence, is what I propose today. And despite our COVID-related fatigue, our exhaustion, our malaise, perhaps in some ways because of those things, we have never needed reason to cheer or reason to join together in common celebration as much as we have needed over these last several months. So a few examples. First comes from the London Majors, winning the Inter-County Baseball League Championship for the first time since 1971, a championship decided at historic Labatt Park, the oldest continually operating baseball grounds in the world. It came from the London Beefeaters, Ontario Football Conference champions for the first time in franchise history. It came too from our Western Mustangs, once again, the best university football team in all of Canada, and once again, reigning Vanier Cup champions. You know, in most other cities, any one of these achievements would be more than enough for a single calendar year and great celebrations. Well, not in the Forest City, or as it's now known, post-Olympics, Canada's Golden City. From quite literally start to finish, London athletes in Tokyo captured the attention of our entire country and put the world on notice. So think about this. The Canadian flag bearer for the opening ceremonies is a Londoner. 4 of our country's 7 gold medals were linked to Londoners, and one of these gold medalists, decathlete Damian Warner, was also the flag bearer for the closing ceremonies. Another, swimmer Maggie McNeil, named Best Female Athlete at the Olympics. No other city in Canada produced more golds than London. You know, fun fact, if London was a country, we'd have more gold medals than 184 of the 206 nations that competed in Tokyo. That's our London. And as a result, and until someone proves otherwise, London will remain Canada's golden city. Hey, but we don't stop there. That's not all. We are officially Canada's City of Music. That's straight from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Back in November, after a long process, UNESCO, based in Paris, France, designated London as a city of music. We are the only city in our country with that designation. This provides incredible opportunities, especially as our economic and social recovery from COVID begins. While there can be no doubt we earned the designation, starting this spring and beyond, We are going to prove why we are, without question, Canada's City of Music. London's internationally recognized UNESCO City of Music designation will build better infrastructure, reorganize the core, redevelop a skilled workforce, and create more memorable experiences while attracting greater events and new visitors to London. Music can and will serve as an important contributor to London's community recovery and renewal while offering a sustained economic boost to our city. I noticed that Senior Valencia and Senior Valencia did not ask me to play guitar with them because they want to promote that great name of music in Canada. But my Cape Breton mother would be proud of the two of you for the great gift that you are. Muchas gracias. So as a first step, I propose that we formally designate London's core area as our defined entertainment district and further strengthen the role that music plays right in the heart of London. We will explore how we can streamline approvals for projects in the entertainment sector and better identify opportunities for investments for entertainment infrastructure. To do so, we need to let the music play. And in that regard, we will develop a new sound bylaw for outdoor concerts and events. Looking ahead, there are also tremendous opportunities to reinvigorate London's downtown and core area through effective partnerships with the private, nonprofit, and institutional sectors. London's post-secondary presence in downtown is strong, with Fanshawe College and now Western University signaling their intent to grow their footprints. We are so proud to have Fanshawe and Western in this community. People sometimes do not realize how critically important it is to have higher education, post-secondary institutions of their caliber right in their city, and we are blessed to have them both. And we will explore, alongside our partners, to create new experiences in the core and new opportunities for London's music talent and our connection to global music talent to succeed and thrive right here in London through investments into incubation capacity for the music and cultural sectors. By taking deliberate steps to embrace and support our music and cultural industries, we will generate new energy and excitement in the core. It will drive economic benefits and increased business engagement. We will foster new employment opportunities while bringing in more events, creating more internationally recognized spaces, and welcome world-class artists to London as we continue to develop incredible talent in our community. We will build on the success of the Junos, the Ontario Country Music Awards, the Canadian Country Music Awards, along with our phenomenal local music, theater, culture, and arts venues. We will look to the leadership from Bud Gardens, Aeolian Hall, the Grand, London Arts Council, the Palace Theatre, London Music Hall, RBC Place, and so many others to work with us and to work with Corey Crossman from the city to exploit our talent for such opportunities. Now is an exceptionally exciting time for London. We have much to look forward to and many future celebrations to share. I know these moments have at times been increasingly difficult to find. In fact, Londoners spent much of the last year enduring and comforting each other through trauma, the likes of which few other communities have ever experienced. I think of a toddler who lost her life falling from a high-rise apartment balcony in Old East Village. I think of countless blue ribbons and blue porch lights in honor of Alexandra Stemp, little 8-year-old girl guide who was tragically struck and killed by a vehicle at Wonderland in Riverside. And I think of the many injured that night. These families have experienced heartbreak beyond measure. I think back to September and the painful, visceral conversations surrounding sexual assault and gender-based violence in wake of trauma experienced both on campus and off. And to this day, I think of June 6th. I think of Salman Afzal, Medea Salman, Yumna Afzal, Talat Afzal, and I think of Fayez Afzal. Look, we all remember what happened, and we must never forget why it happened. It was a terrorist attack, an act of mass murder, and a grotesque expression of hatred rooted in Islamophobia. It was, without question, London's darkest hour. the magnitude of what happened to this family and to our Muslim community at large can make us ask who we are as a city and who we are as Londoners. We now live in a time and in a place where thousands of Muslims, our family members, our neighbors, our friends, co-workers, when they're out for a walk and through no fault of their own, may be looking over their shoulders. But we have an obligation to them and to each other. We have an obligation to the memories of the Afzal family. And above all, as Londoners, we have a moral obligation to Fayez Afzal. So, all of us must now confront the question, so in what kind of community, what kind of city, what kind of country will that little boy's recovery take place, physically, mentally, spiritually? It must not be one where clothing and religion marks one for death. Instead, it must be one where we can celebrate a Londoner who attends the same mosque, practices the same religion, who wears a hijab, and who today is welcomed with open arms as the first Muslim woman to serve on London City Council. Ours is not a community where Londoners look the other way, pretend not to hear, or to keep to themselves while hatred goes unchecked. Instead, it is one where, in the days that followed, thousands of us, people of all ages and backgrounds, walked our streets together, where strangers comforted strangers at the site of the attack, and where children, with messages written in chalk, left notes and promises of a brighter future. Ours is not a community where hatred that claimed the lives of the Afzal family is allowed to fester, in both ways subtle and overt. Instead, it is one where words are backed by action. The creation of an entire anti-racism and anti-oppression division at City Hall to drive systemic change on what is clearly a systemic issue, bringing together voices from across the country as part of a national summit on Islamophobia, listening instead of talking. This creation of the anti-racism and anti-oppression division is so significant because, and one of the things that we have done, we have overhauled our community grants program to ensure that 86% of the funds go to organizations doing anti-racism work and efforts focused on equity and diversity. And that marks an important statement of who we are. Through these measures and so many more, this is how we begin to uphold our obligation to 9-year-old Fayez, and through him, how we honor his sister, his mother, his father, his grandmother. It's how we ultimately reclaim our collective humanity and restore dignity for all Londoners. But you know, Islam is not alone in being targeted for senseless violence. Anti-Semitism is sadly too common. Anti-Black and anti-racism, anti-Indigenous discrimination, those remain prevalent. The recovery to date of more than 1,200 children buried at former residential school sites across our country, well, it repeats a cycle of generational trauma for Indigenous communities. The arson, just 2 months ago, of an Indigenous-led shelter on River Road is a piercing and painful reminder that this is not only an exercise in confronting our past, it is one that continues to this day. Here is what I know. The path towards truth and reconciliation is long and at times uncomfortable. The destination speaks in a fundamental way to who we are as human beings and what we hope to become as a community. I believe Canada is the greatest country in the world. This is also a country whose complex history is marred by racism and violence against Indigenous peoples and other minority groups. Both of those statements can be true. This is not a call for cancellation, nor exuberant celebration. It is a plea for truth, understanding, and true reconciliation. In many ways, and especially in our city, these last 12 months were a time to grieve, a time to empathize, and a time to listen. We will continue to do those things, although in addition, and especially in 2022, this must be a year for action. The stakes are simply too high to do otherwise. People's lives are literally hanging in the balance. In the last year, homeless Londoners were dying at an unprecedented rate. According to some estimates, that number was one person every week, a dramatic increase from the year prior. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? At this event last year, I not only issued a challenge, I made a commitment that we would provide an additional 3,000 affordable housing units over the next 5 years. London had just become the first community in all of Canada to achieve functional zero when it came to veterans' homelessness. We must do the same for chronic homelessness, period. I tell you this, politics isn't just what you believe, it is what you prioritize. And let me be clear, and in no uncertain terms, we have prioritized our most vulnerable, and this cause, like no other city council, will be London's legacy. Since last year's State of the City address, we've made historic investments. Our roadmap to 3,000 units has been unanimously endorsed by council, and this is now an exceptionally detailed plan, albeit with a $1 billion price tag. And we are not doing this alone. This is a multi-pronged approach consisting of the City of London, other orders of government, and the community at large. And why? Because this is an issue that impacts us all, and so it is one that requires our collective efforts. It requires our collective empathy and compassion. It also makes economic sense. Countless numbers of studies and research demonstrates that the costs associated with housing are exponentially less than the costs associated with homelessness. And while this is a 5-year plan, I am heartened by some of the early signs of progress. Did you know that starting this year, thanks to a $68.5 million investment from Council and with support from the CMHC, the London and Middlesex Community Housing will repair and upgrade more than 2,000 units. We also approved $11.2 million to support the Vision Soho Alliance, a first-of-its-kind partnership among 6 local nonprofit organizations with great financial support from others, all of whom are working together to create the single largest affordable housing development in London's history. This plan will see a total of 650 units, 400 of which will be affordable, built on the former Victoria lands, hospital lands, and construction has already started. It's exciting. The progress in subsequent years, though, will only accelerate. We have overwhelming support from our provincial and federal governments, from nonprofits, and an endless list of support groups and agencies. We also have support from ordinary Londoners doing extraordinary things that make a difference for our most vulnerable. Volunteering time, donating to fundraising drives and hamper programs, or self-described charity grandma, a London woman who hangs hundreds of handmade toques from trees in Victoria Park, free for those who need them. Another key contributor to our housing effort must be our development community. We need your increased participation as we work collaboratively. I don't think there's any question the City of London is a committed partner. Despite the pandemic, we issued more than $1 billion in building permits for a 6th straight year, and this time it happened faster than ever before. The value of that construction has also skyrocketed, worth more than twice as what it was in the previous year. Now, many developers have come to me acknowledging London has been good to them and good for business. They want to give back and they want to help. Let me say, in no uncertain terms, this is how you can help. Continue to work with us. Continue with our community, working with us, and together let's become the first city in Canada to achieve functional zero for chronic homelessness. Your legacy will be measured in the lives saved on the street, not the cranes in the sky. Our developers, our builders, and our construction workers are the best anywhere. They prove that time and time again. In fact, most recently, London ranked first amongst 10 cities across our country, analyzed by the Municipal Benchmarking Network when it came to new housing units per capita. Did you know we outpaced Toronto, Calgary, Montreal? So imagine what it would do if we had that same enthusiasm, that same dedication and innovation applied to affordable housing. Make no mistake, our commitment is strong and unwavering. We are approaching this with as great a focus as anything that has ever come before us, and we will use all tools at our disposal to ensure its success. We will deploy those measures to ensure even greater residential intensification in the core. And while we are growing steadily, we require even greater resolve to make that growth incredibly dynamic. Let me also say that while we undertake this historic effort, and just as we provide supports for London's most vulnerable, there must be parallel supports for those who live, shop, and work in the downtown and surrounding areas. As such, we have amended our core area action plan to better reflect the realities of the pandemic. This includes greater investments in street cleaning and garbage collection, activating Dundas Place with music and other activities, and enhanced communications to highlight positive events in the core. What has also become abundantly clear to me, however, is the need for more police officers. Our London Police Service is one of the leanest police services in Ontario across almost every metric. For too long, we have asked them to do too much with too little. An investment towards increasing the size of our police service at this stage is as much about core revitalization and economic prosperity as it is about safety and security for all Londoners. We must find a way to provide our London Police Service with greater resources, thereby providing London residents and businesses with increased support and protection. You'll remember I said before that politics isn't just what you believe, it's what you prioritize. When I first took office, 1 month after being sworn in at my first State of the City, I not only told you what I believed, I told you what I would prioritize. Aside from London's most vulnerable, I made it clear that jobs and economic prosperity would be prioritized as never before. So would it surprise you to know that at this moment, ours is the hottest economy anywhere in Ontario? In fact, not only is London the best performing economy in all of Ontario, according to Stats Canada, our record is unmatched anywhere in the country. London is currently in the midst of 18 straight months of net new employment growth. That's the longest streak of monthly job creation of any municipality in Canada. And during those 18 months, we have added 56,200 net new jobs. That's 56,200 people now gainfully employed who were not working when the pandemic hit. Our employment rate is now back and better than pre-pandemic levels and lower than both the current provincial and national averages. Neither of these things were true when Council took office. 3.5 years ago, our labor participation rate was the worst in Ontario. Well, as of last month, it's improved at a faster rate than anywhere else in the province. And here's something else. During the entire term of Council, on a per capita basis, London's workforce has increased at a greater pace than economies in Toronto, Kitchener, Waterloo, Hamilton, Guelph, Windsor. Some thought I was overreaching after being elected when I said by the end of this term, I wanted to see 13,000 additional Londoners working. Well, we've certainly exceeded that nearly 3 times over. That's everything to do with the confidence our business community is showing in London. And to the businesses in London, I say thank you. We are once again the undisputed economic engine of Southern Ontario. And when this council took office, more than a few people were asking, what's going on with the London economy? Well, the question hasn't changed, but the tone certainly has. So what is going on with the London economy? We didn't believe this turnaround into existence. Council and staff prioritized it. We narrowed our focus. We worked on it, especially when the pandemic hit. We recognized in the very early days of COVID that rebuilding and revitalizing London would necessitate an equally unprecedented response. That's why, along with then Deputy Mayor Jesse Helmer, we formed economic and social recovery task forces, which would later morph into the London Community Recovery Network. That's a first-of-its-kind approach in all of Canada, including widespread representation from our public, our private, nonprofit, and institutional sectors. And the network's sole purpose was to drive a strong and inclusive recovery for London. Many of you listening played an important part in that London Community Recovery Network. And again, my gratitude. The many months of work put in by members of the network is one of the primary reasons ours has performed better than any other economy in Ontario during the pandemic, and why it will continue to do so. It is appropriate I pay tribute to our smaller employers who have been impacted by COVID. I think of downtown London, where last year, despite 10 businesses closing, 36 new businesses opened, and that included 20 restaurants. It's why we put such great emphasis on shopping local, and during the pandemic, ordering takeout. This hasn't changed, and we need all Londoners to continue that commitment. We also see constant examples of London's entrepreneurial spirit. Look at one such company, In the Clear Zone, a female-led startup launched by 2 Western grads, now receiving great support from Tech Alliance, the Chamber, and others as they go national. But our efforts are far from over. The recovery continues, and at times it's in fits and starts, but it continues nevertheless. And so too will our work. And as strong as our economy has remained, like so many other things, we know there will be better days ahead. Over the coming months, we can expect more than 1,200 jobs coming from 2 Amazon warehouses in London and a large fulfillment center under construction at the former Ford assembly site. More than 1,600 jobs will come from Maple Leaf Foods when it opens later this spring. A few months after that, construction on Phase 1 of the Hard Rock Hotel at the factory should be underway. Other new industries, including Anvo Pharma, Aspire Food Group, and Boss Innovations, will soon open their doors, requiring hundreds of employees. And most recently, where I attended a Nestle's plant expansion and a Labatt plant expansion, to name just a couple, those will generate hundreds of new jobs here in London, Ontario. The growth of our manufacturing sector is complemented by the efforts of Kapil Lakhotia and his team at the London Economic Development Corporation. In addition to incorporating the development of a film city in our industry, in our city, the next challenge will be to attract and retain white-collar workers in London. And there are a number of question marks as a result of the pandemic and how that will work. Not only are more jobs coming, but so too are the people. According to a recent study that looked at the fastest growing medium to large size cities in North America over the last 5 years, London ranks 2nd in Canada and 7th in all of North America. The cost of living remains comparatively low, and despite historic investments in affordable housing and transportation, Council just approved its lowest tax rate in 4 years at 2.8%, well below the rate of inflation. So with all of these jobs and all of these people, what becomes obvious is the need to improve how we get around, especially to areas where many of the jobs are located. This is something the London Transit Commission is working hard to achieve. Despite the pandemic and despite an operator shortage, there are plans in place to extend transit into Innovation Park through a new on-demand service. There are also plans to expand service to the Huron and Robins Hill Road area. The timing, however, depends on how fast we can recruit, hire, and train new operators. In the same way, we've proven ourselves the undisputed economic engine of southwestern Ontario. We are also the region's transportation hub. The provincial government has said as much on multiple occasions, and it's why I was given the responsibility around this time last year of chairing the Southwest Ontario Transportation Task Force. This includes representation from mayors and Indigenous communities across the region with a mandate to augment connections between rail, bus, road, air, water, and local transit service. We've been meeting regularly over the last 12 months and are in the process of finalizing a list of recommendations to be submitted to Ontario's Minister of Transportation in March. It'd be premature for me to share details of our draft report. However, I can say there will be recommendations for enhancements in the short, medium, and long term to all modes of transportation. That includes rail, transit, and active transportation, all with an overarching focus on regional intercity connectivity. And while I'm excited to share our specific recommendations as soon as we're able, the wheels are already in motion, pardon the pun, on several fronts. For example, last month, Council endorsed the creation of a downtown transit hub where public transit and rail service will converge. This is in addition to bike storage, e-vehicle charging, those stations there, shuttles, scooters, and car shares. The purpose is not only to make it easier for Londoners to get around, it is equally vital to ensure people from major regions can get to and around London with greater ease. Imagine I'm only halfway through. Just a little bit left. The strategy is similar with the arrival of GO Transit. As of today, it's no secret the service is limited, especially if you're going to Toronto. But the fact is, London now has a stake in the ground, and it's an important first step. And it's exponentially easier to build on something than it is merely to talk about something. The reality is Metrolinx would not have spent $2.5 million on a 2-year trial just to see it fail. I expect their presence to grow in and through London, and for that I appreciate the work done by Metrolinx in the province. Here's a fun fact. Despite a temporary reduction in service due to COVID, our Via Rail terminal remains the 4th busiest in all of Canada. London matters. The provincial government recognizes this. The federal government does too. And that's why they're in the process of studying how to provide faster, more frequent, and more reliable rail service out of London. These efforts will improve our connectivity to Toronto, through southwestern Ontario to Windsor and Sarnia. That's a priority. We also need to recognize as a transportation hub that in the same way we look at Toronto, others look to London. They want to come here. And of course, we want them here. That's one of the most immediate benefits of our GO Transit service. Don't think only of Toronto. Think of the greater frequency of service between London, Kitchener, Waterloo, St. Mary, Stratford. These are all incredibly important areas for our region, especially in our ever-expanding tech and tourism sectors. And while all this takes place, work continues on building out our own rapid transit system here in London, the largest infrastructure project in our city's history. In less than 4 years, we not only secured record investments from our provincial and federal partners, we have shovels in the ground. Just a few weeks ago, work was completed on the first phase of construction of what's known as the Downtown Loop. Work on the remaining phases will take place this year and next. The East London Link, which connects downtown with Fanshawe College and the airport, starts this spring, while work on the Wellington Gateway begins next year. Each of these represents generational and transformative changes to London's transit system. This transformation, by the way, includes a shift away from diesel and towards a fully electrified bus fleet. Now, that was something I announced 2 years ago at State of the City. And after a lot of research, and in spite of COVID, we're moving forward. Just last month, in another unanimous vote, Council approved $26 million to begin the process purchasing 10 electric buses and 7 chargers. With this initial placement approved, I believe it will lead to even greater contributions from our provincial and our federal partners. This will only accelerate the conversion to an electrified public transit fleet. And why? Well, locally, greenhouse gas emissions from LTC buses represent as much as 40% of total emissions, either controlled by or directly influenced by the City of London. Electrification remains one of the single most impactful things that we can do as a city to achieve our goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 or sooner. More details on how we plan to thoughtfully and aggressively address what this council has declared to be a climate emergency will be declared next month through the release of our Climate Emergency Action Plan. I'll say it again. Politics isn't just what you believe, it's what you prioritize. Remember when I first took office, just 1 month after being sworn in at my first State of the City, I not only told you what I believed, I told you what I would prioritize. Those priorities were then what they remain today: jobs, transportation, and supporting London's most vulnerable. In the same way this community has come together during the pandemic, during moments of great joy and times of unimaginable sadness, we have likewise rallied in support of these three key priorities. However, no municipality can do it alone. We continue to require support and cooperation from our provincial and federal government partners. Regardless of political affiliation, London has been blessed in that regard, and we've enjoyed phenomenal support from our local members of parliament and provincial parliament. And to them, I want to say thank you. You know, I've spent considerable time this morning detailing what together we have accomplished. I'd like now for a moment to share with you what I have learned. More than anything, I've learned that every time we Londoners have had a chance to turn inward, to think only of ourselves, we have instead chosen to look outward and to think of others. Londoners believe in each other, and they believe in our community. We're not merely a city, we're family. And families celebrate together, families grieve together, families succeed together. We've got a city to love, so let's wrap our arms around it. Let's put our heads together and let's lead. These are the traits of a great city, one that has proven itself capable of withstanding unimaginable trauma, while at the same time allowing us to build a fairer, more prosperous, and compassionate London. So let's not only continue believing in each other, let's ensure we prioritize each other, that we always prioritize the city we love and call home. And while the state of our times is unprecedented, the state of our city is strong. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to serve. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vijay Lakshmikantan, past president of the London Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mayor, for your thoughtful and inspirational message of hope for our future. It's wonderful to hear all the positive stories about our community. We value your continued leadership and for being with us here today to share your thoughts on the road ahead. I'd also like to thank today's sponsors. Deloitte, thank you for your continued support as our principal sponsor of this great event. We are truly fortunate to have an organization like Deloitte that continues to support London's businesses through events such as this. And TD, thank you for your continued support of the Chamber and for being today's production and live stream sponsor. We are very proud to have you and your support. And thank you to all the ticket holders. We have some great news here. You've donated a portion of your meal ticket to this event, and we are extremely pleased to announce that we have raised over $22,000 to the Business Cares Food Drive. This donation will go a long way in helping our community. And now, for the second year, our fireside chat, question and answer period with Mayor Ed Holder. The Mayor will be joined this year by our moderator, Mandy Fields, Associate Manager, Brand Partnerships with Bell Media.
Well, good morning, Mayor Holder. That was powerful.
Well, good morning, Mandy. Thank you. That was very kind of you.
Lives saved on the streets, not the cranes in the sky. That got me in the back room there. Wow.
Well, we have such a great community. And, you know, Londoners get it. They really do. When I talk about London being family from my heart, I know that to be true. I've seen it time and time and time again. So that was easy to say such things because I truly, truly meant it.
Well, you could feel it. Speaking of Londoners, I want to acknowledge Graham Henderson, the new CEO of the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, he's pretty good, isn't he? Pretty
good. Talk about the right guy at the right time. Former CEO of Music Canada, now UNESCO, City of Music, at the helm, leading us through this. That's pretty exciting.
And I think those opportunities for music as an economic force in our community, I think that's just going to be incredible. So, you know, Jerry McCartney, we got to give him a shout out because, you know, he was here forever, and and we love Jerry, and as we love Graham. And you know what? It's going to be great under Graham's leadership as we go forward as a city. And while it's not all about music, music is a fundamental, and you can see what it has done in cities across the United States and around the world. I think of Austin, Texas, for example. Oh my goodness. I think of the home of the blues and the home of jazz in different cities in the States and what they have done. So I think our opportunities are truly, truly ahead of us.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm super excited about it.
Absolutely.
I do have one question with the lockdown lifting, the most recent one on January 31st. I thought I'd start us off light. Someone asked me in the hallway, "Are you going to give him a zinger?" So here's a zinger, Ed.
All right.
Mayor Holder, is there a local restaurant that you can't wait to go to in the near future?
Well, it's the most unfair question in the world because we've got some of the best restaurants and bars throughout our region. But you know, if I had to think about it, I suppose, I don't know, I kind of like Richie's for breakfast. It's a tradition, and they're great. And if I was going to have a beer, it's close to the office. I'm going to go to Cool's. I haven't done that in a while. And if I was going to have dinner again downtown, probably Waldo's on King. You know, those are just three of many that are just that are great. And you can tell by looking at me, I don't suffer from not having food. So as a result, I enjoy going to restaurants. I'll look forward to going back to them.
You know, when I was getting dressed this morning, putting on, you know, purple pantsuit and a pandemic, I was thinking about all the potato chips I've been eating in this pandemic. So I'm with you. I haven't suffered at all.
Well, now we need to get our gyms open to capacity the way that they can be, because I think, and again, interestingly, we've got great gyms in this city, but I can't not do a shout out to Good Life because they are the largest gym emporium throughout the country, headquartered right here in London, Ontario. And Dave Patchell-Evans will patch, you know, I'll tell you, what a great leader he's been, and what a great supporter of community events. I have a lot of time for him. And we have a lot of great gyms and the like, and smaller independent ones throughout the city, and we're just blessed. So you and me both, we'll kind of jump those treadmills and do what we need to do.
Once those doors open. I have a question. This one's a bit close to home to my heart. So tomorrow's Bell Let's Talk Day. I'm really curious, Mayor Holder, you have a big job. So how have you been managing your stress and your mental health well-being?
Oh. Well, first, let me give a shout out to Bell. Bell Media has done a great job supporting and promoting this every year. And you know what that does? That creates awareness for our whole community. And so I need to say thank you to them, because that kind of commitment doesn't come without cost, just like the sponsors of today's State of the City. And TD's great. We appreciate them. Deloitte is great. We are grateful to them too. But Bell Media, especially for this, because, you know, issues around mental health, I would predict to you that mental health becomes one of the major issues and is of our time. And you know, I've seen recent commercials. I'm here to listen, you know, and I said, even in my State of the City today, I talked about some of the aspects of listening that we need to do as a community to understand each other. And with understanding, there's acceptance, and with acceptance, there is that creates relationships. How do I deal with it? It's I talk a lot. And that probably releases some of the tension. I play guitar poorly, even if Senior Valencia did not want me today. It's just one of the things that I do at home, and I just enjoy that as well. But for everyone, I think it's been tougher as a result of the pandemic. I don't think there's any question about that. And so I would urge people that as they find that they're in circumstances that are getting more difficult to cope with, to reach out, to call someone, ask for help. Don't be so proud that because the negative impact is too great. And and I think it's important. Mental health is, again, the issue of our time.
You know, and I don't think 10 years ago we would have talked openly about this. And so I do appreciate your comments about, not because I work at Bell Media, but just in general, a lot of families live with this, care for one another. So I appreciate your honesty.
Well, you know, look, we've all gone, just imagine the year we've gone through, the trauma that we as a city have gone through this past year, and the joys. And, you know, there's ups and there's downs, and of course, surrounded by the pandemic. You know, and I can imagine anyone listening to this podcast, this video, can put themselves into a position where they've gone through points where it seems like there's no end to the bottom. And the notion of even looking up to see the top is impossible. That's when they need to reach out. And it could be financial challenges because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It could be health issues, some related to the pandemic, some not. But when you think you're not in control, you're not in control. And then it's time to ask for help. And great people ask for help.
And I've heard you say before that sometimes it's when people think they don't have choices, but there's more choices out there today than ever before.
There are, for sure. There are great choices. And that's why, you know, we ask people to support Bell's Let's Talk, you know, because why? Because we need to have those avenues where people can reach out. And if they feel that they need to speak with someone, to do that, now more than ever. Because the stressors on business people, the stressors on individual Londoners, probably the greatest it's ever been, and my heart goes to them. You know, I had someone, I was at a food store yesterday, shopping local, getting some groceries, and a woman came up to me and she said, "We don't know each other," but she said, "I can't imagine the stress that you and all members of City Council must feel right now, dealing with the issues that you didn't anticipate, didn't expect." And she said, "I just want you to know that we're thinking about you." And that kind of support is wonderful. So I say to my colleagues at council, they've done a heck of a job. You really have. And I know it's not been easy, but I honor the work that councillors have done, that our city staff have done as they deal with this, because there is a lot of stress. And stress can do a lot of physical damage as well as mental damage. So I encourage people to take care of themselves now more than ever.
I know this is virtual, but I can feel that. And I know it's hard for the people who are watching to really get that. So thank you. And I think that your counselors would appreciate what you just said there. This is so true.
Well, they work very hard. And they've, you know, they have the interests of London and Londoners always first and foremost. I said that to some extent, but I'll reinforce it again today. And our staff, I mean, they work heart and soul to put London first. And that's why sometimes when and there are some crazies out there, and I don't mean under mental health, I mean people who express opinions without knowledge, who can be nasty. And thank goodness it's a small minority. And I wish they'd all stop, because it's not productive, it's disrespectful, and frankly not helpful for the greater good. And you know, my Cape Breton mom used to say that a community is measured by how well we look after those who are less able to care for themselves. You know, honestly, that's what you're doing with Bell Media's Let's Talk. I applaud that. And in the same way that we say let's talk, there are some that should talk less.
So I've got a question here from Brian Costigan. Brian's with RBC Royal Bank. And so here we go. So besides lifting restrictions, which is decided provincially, what do you see as the biggest thing Londoners in City Hall can do to revitalize downtown and downtown businesses?
Well, look, as we know, there's a lot of challenges in downtown. We see homelessness down there. We see individuals with mental health and drug addiction issues that congregate there as well. I think one of the great things that we can do is we can, in terms of revitalization of our core, we need to aggressively have greater density, more residential units in downtown. I think we have something like 7,900 residential units now, but we need to do considerably more. If one said to me, would doubling it be inappropriate? I would say no. And there's some things that we can do from a zoning standpoint that may make some sense. But also, I think endorsing our downtown and our core as the entertainment district. And I would love to see Dundas, King, Richmond, Talbot hopping with signs of cultural music, the things that need to be done to make the downtown a place to come to. Look, when we have our great games with the London Knights at Bud Gardens, there's no hesitation for people to come downtown.
Yeah.
None. And they pack restaurants and the parking and all the ancillary things that you know happens. Well, we need to do the very same thing on a consistent and regular basis with music and culture. And by identifying the downtown and the core as our entertainment district, that will make a significant impact and will be a place that people will come to because we need people to come to events. Look, when we have great acts that the Bud books, do you know we fill it? When the Aeolian Hall on Dundas books great performances, we come. The Grand Theater, when they book great events, we come. And we know that the pandemic has impacted a lot of this. And yet, despite the pandemic, imagine how London has done. If we had not had the pandemic, oh goodness, we would have just, as strong as we have been economically, it would have been that much greater without the pandemic. But look, those are cards you deal with. And it's kind of like your other question, how do you deal with the pandemic? You kind of take it as it goes, but we can all do our part, getting our vaccinations, our boosters, getting our younger people vaccinated, encouraging those who are in the 10% to do it. And I don't say isolate them, don't make them feel like lepers, but encourage them to do what they can to get their shots, just so we can make London a safer and a better place. So it's a complicated question. I've only scratched the surface of it. And that's something that council is dealing with now. We have a newer member of council, John Fife Miller, for the downtown, because our former council member has gone on to federal politics, Ariel Kevaga, and we certainly wish her well. And John has taken an extremely proactive focus on the downtown. We're excited about that as well, and and he will help lead us in terms of where our downtown is going.
I'm going to move on to the next question, but I do want to, I think that's such a great parallel about the London Knights and how, you're right, we see thousands and thousands, and I was fortunate to work on the Canadian Country Music Awards with the amazing Natalie Wakayabashi.
They didn't want me to sing there either. I'm not sure what happened,
But you're right. That's actually, I think it's a really good talking point and something for us to think about when we are promoting the downtown, that we do it for the Knights. So let's do it for arts and culture.
And look, how many acts have we seen at Bud Gardens that have produced just some incredible talent there?
Exactly.
And we go.
And we go.
And we go.
Yeah.
And we support downtown that way. So if part of it is as we clean our downtown and get it better and better, Dundas Place, which has the ability to be shut down, which we have done at different times for appropriate events, that's golden.
Yes.
And as our downtown loop is nearing completion, we're very excited about what downtown is going to be looking like. That's hope for the future. And I'll tell you, that to me is the positive. I think the question mark will still be how many people are going to be coming back to work versus working from home, and that'll have some impact for our white-collar industries, which is why we asked the LEDC to put some focus on that as well, to see if we can also, in the same way we attract industry, can we attract white-collar groups to come to our great city for the lower tax rate, the quality of life, the great workforce that we have, and who doesn't want to be in London?
Well, and it's beautiful.
It's a great
We
time.
have a beautiful city. Mojde Cox, question for you from Mojde, who is the Executive Director of Pillar Nonprofit Network. Economic justice is integral in recovery. What is the city's role in elevating equity-deserving folks who have been hardest hit during the pandemic? How will you help to center them in this plan and remove barriers to economic advancement?
Maja, that's it's like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
But I would say this. The commitment that London City Council took to establish 3,000 affordable housing units, which, by the way, is a whole array of housing that goes anywhere from something, a percentage under market rent, that could be 20, 25%, to rent geared to income, to housing where people require supports to take their meds, to do whatever they do. I think that's an important thing that we have done. I would tell you that in addition, when we morphed our social and economic task forces into the London Community Recovery Network, so many agencies that support and assist our most vulnerable were part of that as well, giving us strong advice as to what it is that we need to do. Pillar, Majda will know, was part of that as well, and made serious contributions to what it is where we need to go as a city. I think housing is a fundamental premise. I think the safe consumption site that is currently being built on York Street is another testament to the need to be able to deal with drug addictions. And as I've said before, why that? Because if someone's alive, you can deal with them. But if they're dead from overdose, you can't help them anymore. And you know, many of these people are contributing members to society. Others have other challenges, but you need them alive to be able to work with them. And frankly, that's part of the responsibility of a caring community. And that's the community that I'm proud to lead.
Thank you. It's a big question. It's complicated.
And that only touches the surface of it.
I know.
I know it does.
I know. I'm going to switch over to bylaws. So I'm the mom of a drummer, and having had police at my door 4 times when Jet was 10, my question is about how will we as a city be able to support young musicians and festivals with the current bylaws? Mayor Holder, will the city commit to reviewing all bylaws that might affect the music community adversely to ensure that heritage venues are protected and that a flourishing music community is not held back by bylaws that are not appropriate in a UNESCO-designated city of music?
Well, as I indicated, Mandy, in my comments earlier this morning, that I am looking to have council designate downtown as the entertainment district.
Okay.
I also indicated that it was critical to have bylaws changed and that would be necessary to accommodate music. My statement was very clear. Let the music play. And what does that mean? That means that we need to have guidelines that are flexible, more reasonable, and give people a reason to come downtown because they want to be where, not just where the action is, but where the talent and where the music is. And if the music's downtown or in our parks, we need to be able to accommodate that. So some work needs to be done. London is very sensitive to our noise bylaws, for example. But there needs to be some flexibility on noise bylaws. There needs to be flexibility on timing of when groups can play. And look, I've heard phenomenal music out of the parks. I remember, though, it was probably a couple of years ago, and I lived downtown, and I heard horrible music coming out. And maybe it was just because it wasn't my kind of music, I'm not sure. It was terrible. And they heard it in Westmount. I had one of our city managers make that comment at the time, because it was just blaring, and I don't know.
It wasn't the Orlando.
It wasn't Orlando, Valencia.
Valencia. When you said let the music play, I was hoping you guys would just start drumming.
Yeah, I thought they were just going to jump right in. Maybe they wanted me to sing. I don't know. Guantanamera, hoy the Guantanamera. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so Michelle
You don't
Quinton,
want me to sing.
Goodwill. Question, how might we optimize zoning, especially inner city, to ensure diverse, dense, and mixed-use communities and development and less sprawl and more of what we are seeing in Soho?
That's a big question. I think the Vision Soho, that alliance of 6 partners, is so unique in Canada. So Homes Unlimited and Zarin and Indwell, amongst others. Now, Indwell is an interesting organization
Indwell.
because they do that wraparound service, and they've done this right across the province. I first saw their efforts in Woodstock when I had the opportunity to visit. And And then in addition, you get the food bank who throws $1 million into the mix, the London Community Foundation who supports it financially. Honest to goodness, we had partners involved in this initiative like we have never seen before. In addition, the city made a significant contribution. And what was great about that was we took the old, unused Victoria Hospital lands and we are going to make them vital. I would like to see that replicated in London, which doesn't necessarily just mean downtown, but where there are opportunities for land. And our development community will tell you that's one of the biggest challenges is land.
Is land.
And I would say it's the same sort of thing here. I think having greater residential intensification downtown, potentially a doubling of where we are now, would have a dramatic impact. I would tell you that one of the things that we did as incentives for the development community is that we had relief on development charges that encouraged developers to be able to build more. Maybe that needs to be reconsidered again. In the area, I'm thinking from the tracks down in by York Street up to the tracks, maybe Oxford Street, from the river to Wellington. I don't know, Waterloo, not sure there, but Wellington for sure. And looking at that to see if there's some opportunities for us to increase our residential development. And you know what that drives? That drives more things like grocery stores and more retail. There'll be reasons for people to be downtown. And besides, one of the things that we have in London is a housing shortage. There's a crisis going on.
Yeah.
And to be able to have that opportunity downtown, plus the great developments we have across the city, I see it as a blending.
Thank you. Tracy Boland from Ontario West Insurance Brokers has a question. Is there a long-range plan for the homeless and drug issue that we are seeing in the core? Can you share the steps and the agencies involved with this plan? And I think this is really sweet. Tracy also passes on her thanks to you and your staff for the past 2 years of work and the dedication to London through the pandemic.
Well, thanks, Tracy. Interesting, her father was the one who negotiated the purchase of Ontario West Insurance Brokers for me. I had that company
Okay.
many years ago. And the other side, Ontario West Agency, I sold that to Stevenson and Hunt, as but the other comments made. But and by the way, Ontario West, again, another company who gets it under Tracy and Jamie Marshall's leadership. They just do a great job of community outreach, and I applaud them. And that's how companies can make a difference. So in a sense, I'm going to throw it back to companies like Ontario West. You know, it was Kennedy who said in his inaugural speech, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And her company is much like that. There are givers. Because, you know, my Cape Breton mom always said there's two kinds of people in the world, givers and takers.
Yeah.
And if you surround yourself with givers, you're going to be okay. And so to be able to deal with issues around mental health and drugs, look, we have HIV/AIDS who show great leadership in our downtown and frankly have taken the lead on the safe consumption site being built on York Street. And we're grateful for their leadership, Brian and his team who are doing that. I would tell you as well, when I think of what the food bank did with 519 Pursuit, they worked together over the course of this pandemic in conjunction with our RBC Place, and they provided food, breakfasts and lunches for individuals in great need. And our agencies stood on their heads as well as we've been dealing with this pandemic and really trying to make a difference. And it strikes me that when I look at the partnerships, and that's what I'm going to come back to answer the question, I guess. When I look at what the partnerships are, and again, I'll come back to London Community Recovery Network, which is going to be so important as we deal with these issues. Look, these issues didn't happen yesterday, a year ago, 5 years ago, and they can't be fixed like that. Wouldn't that be great? But that's not our reality. But as we understand and deal better with issues around drugs and mental health, and as we have stabilization places to take individuals. I mean, here's an example. You know, we pick up someone who's challenged, and we take them to hospital, because where else can you take them today? and there's not many places. And then if the paramedics take them, or if the police are involved in it, and they have to wait countless hours at the hospital until that individual is released, and the impact and cost on paramedic services, police services, is huge. So what we need to develop are more stabilization places with activities where individuals can go, and we can help deal with that. I mean, one of the things through this winter, as cold as it has been, and we provided, as we did last year, these trailers on 2 different sites to be able to take individuals who have a significant need. But the other part is we try to give them some activities so that they just, because people don't want to be bored, they want to be able to do things that are meaningful. So I give credit to the organizations that are involved in that. Sarah Campbell and her team are doing some great work with that as well. So I think that when I look at this is a collaboration of many agencies coming together. And it's not just for the city to, quote, solve it. That's not how that works. You need to have agency support, and you need to be able to recognize that London, because we're a regional center, we will draw people. There will be those who from outlying communities in good faith will say, we've done as much as we can for an individual. If you want more, you have to go to London. And I get that. So London probably gets more than its share of folks from away. But having said it, we don't turn people down. It's not our way. And so it's not a simple situation, and it's not nor is it a simple answer, but it's a process. And we ask people for their indulgence as we work through issues around stabilization spaces and as we work towards our affordable housing goals.
Thank you. You know, there's a whole lot there that you said that is really a part of our final question. But what resonates with me is that we all have a piece of this.
Yeah.
We all have a hand in this. It's not just, it reminds me of the Pledge to End Bullying when Bill Tucker led that.
Yeah.
And he's like, bullying is not just a school issue. Bullying is an issue, you know, in community, in homes, in restaurants. It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yep.
Thank you. Crispin Colvin,
Love Crispin.
with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. London has a strong agri-food processing base with several companies calling London home. As agriculture contributes over $47 billion to the Ontario economy, is the City of London looking to attract more agri-food businesses, or are there other priorities which will drive the future of London?
You know, I last dealt with Crispin. I used to call him one of my favorite Liberals. This is before I was non-political, which I am these days, have to be, for London's sake. But he was on the RBC Place Board with me. And he was also connected with me in my first time as a member of the Board of Governors at Western. And he comes from a rural background and provides that perspective as always. Here's what's true about London. We have many areas of expertise. I think one of the reasons why our economy has done as well as it has is that we are not single sector driven. But one of the areas of specialization that we have is commercial agricultural businesses. So you just have to imagine, I mentioned Nestle's and Labatt's earlier in my comments, and that's 2 of them. But when I think of Dr. Edgar, I think of the cakery. I think of, oh my goodness. I want to say in terms of employment, it is, the commercial agriculture is a major employer in our city and will continue to be. But because we're so diversified, we have areas in digital gaming that is a huge part to us. Music will be developing as a major play for us as well. I would tell you, led by General Dynamics Land Systems, security and defense industry is big for us. Probably the biggest is commercial agriculture. And because we're as large as we are, that tends to draw more. And why London? London is an urban oasis in a sea of agriculture. And in that sea of agriculture, we have cash crops, and we have various cattle. So for Dr. Edgar and their pizzas, and they look at the cheese, because we have cows, we have pork, so you can do all the meats, you can do all the wheats, right from around and surrounding London. It is a huge opportunity. And that's what I look at when I think of London, a diverse economy, but with a tremendous focus that will never leave us on commercial agriculture, because like begets like. And there are opportunities of combining together to be in a similar geography and the like. I mean, Maple Leaf Foods.
Yeah.
There's just the most recent example.
Well, and with Bondwell in our back door,
Yep.
Mount Bridges, it's Green Giant, like that.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that we don't know that it's actually right in our backyard or right in our community. The Fields to Forks, fun fact, Fields to Forks started in London, Ontario, and it's about food, it's about agriculture. It's now across Canada because of what the London businesses showcased and put a spotlight on it, that other agribusinesses wanted to be a part of it.
So I look at the Great Middlesex County, led by Warden Alison Warwick, and just before here, more recently, Kathy Burkhardt Jessen.
Yes.
And this region is massive when it comes to agriculture. And I look at Strathroy Foods, one of my earliest clients in my old business, and they were processing vegetables and the like. It was incredible what they would do. So commercial agro will continue to be a growing part of our economy. I'm so confident of that.
Couldn't agree with you more. Last question.
Yeah, you're not done.
I'm not done. I can see the hook. When I was getting ready this morning and I was like thinking about this opportunity, and honestly, I would not have imagined a year ago being here. So thank you. Truly, thank you. It's an honor. In 2013, you were the first male ambassador of Tampon Tuesday. It was our 4-year anniversary. At the time, you were a member of Parliament, and since that time, I've watched you continue to put action into your voice priorities. In 2016, I saw you at the Junos Indigenous Honoring Ceremony. 2018, we chatted at the groundbreaking of Indwell's property on Dundas. This past year, you joined me and others, including Chief Adrian Christian, elected Chief of Oneida Nation of the Thames at the July 1st Solidarity March. And then I saw you again at the sunrise ceremony at Namarin Friendship Center on September 30th. I've come to know you and your magnificent support of the Business Cares food drive, and what I've seen is someone who will champion the most marginalized members of his community. And my question, Mayor Holder, is, will you join us at the Imagine Build to build some affordable and accessible homes on and with the Oneida Nation of the Thames? You would be in good company, sir. Fanshawe College has partnered, Unifor, Team Truck Centers, General Dynamic Land Systems, Liuna, Bardwell Victorian Restoration, and many, many others. Lynn Davis, Glenn Pearson, Jane Roy. The list goes on. They've all embraced that reconciliation is a journey for all Canadians, and my question is, will you help us?
Yes.
Thank you. Miigwech, Yako, thank you. It's an honor.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me start by saying a big thank you to your worship, Mayor Ed Holder, for not only providing us a view into the many things that are happening here in the City of London, but also for entertaining the questions through our fireside chat. On behalf of Londoners, we want to let you know that we appreciate you and your team and your extraordinary efforts through the pandemic. For those that don't know me, my name is Stuart Cottrell, and I'm a partner with our tax practice at Deloitte. I'm excited to be here with you virtually this morning. Once again, Deloitte is excited to be continuing to partner with the London Chamber of Commerce to bring you the State of the City address. I want to thank the London Chamber for hosting today's event, since we believe it is more important now than ever for businesses to stay informed and connected as we continue to evolve and thrive given the current environment. I also want to thank our friends at TD who are quick to help us make this a success through rapidly pivoting from a hybrid event to a virtual one in just a few weeks. 2021 has been another interesting year for Canada and the world. The past 24 months have helped us to recognize the importance of business and building resilience and flexibility into every planning cycle. At Deloitte, we are pleased to work with many business leaders in this community, uncovering new opportunities and being part of their growth journey. We have increased our focus on investment in serving clients in the mid-market, both here in London and around the area. And we're helping those firms that require a diverse set of services beyond just that of the traditional accounting firm. We've helped our clients through M&A accounting transactions, going public, finance transformations, integrations, and compensation planning, just to name a few things. As we help our clients develop their path forward, we are always have an eye to the future, the opportunities ahead, and the waves that have yet to make it ashore. To that end, we work closely with our skilled economists to stay one step ahead. And to share those insights with you today, we have Matthew Stewart, a director of our Economics and Financial Advisory Group at Deloitte Canada. Matthew has almost 20 years' experience in economic forecasting, economic consulting, and international development. Prior to joining Deloitte, he was the head of economics department at the Conference Board of Canada, where he was responsible for all economic forecast publications, overseeing the significant creation of economic analysis, including industry forecasts. And Matthew has significant experience leading complex economic consulting projects, including labor demand and supply projections, which I'm sure is something that everyone's felt the impact of recently. He has a Master's of Economics from McMaster University, and we are happy to say that he also has a BA in Economics right here from Western University in London. So without further ado, please help me welcome Matthew Stewart. Over to you, Matthew.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's such an exciting time to be an economist. There's so much going on. We've got rising inflation. We have sky-high housing prices. We have challenges with the job markets and hiring. It's really my pleasure to come here today and talk to you just a little bit about some of the key issues facing the economy, a little bit about what to expect over the next couple of years, and then a little bit around how London is performing. I'm a little disappointed not to do this in person. I've always enjoyed London. I loved my time when I actually went to school in London, and I was really looking forward to getting back, but hopefully I'll get to do that again soon. What I thought I would do today is really leave you with four key messages around the economy and what to expect. First, the economic recovery has slowed, particularly as Omicron has hit, but we expect that growth is going to accelerate as the risks from the latest wave abate, and we're going to see a really strong year of economic growth for Canada, Ontario, and particularly London. Key to that growth is really the labor market, which is largely recovered. And one of the key challenges is rising job vacancies. The strength of that labor market is really feeding the housing or the household side of the economy. And that's really what's driving Canada's economic growth. As households begin to spend, particularly on things like services and spend the incredible amount of savings that they built up over the last year, that's going to drive economic growth very strong over the next basically 2 years. But it's not without challenges. Households have taken on a significant amount of debt, and that's going to weigh on the household sector of the economy. So when we think about longer term growth and once that household sector tapers off, we really have to look to the business side of the economy to pick up some of that slack. And it's here where Canada is seeing some of those challenges. So I think we have to look for policies to help improve business investment so we can shift away from households towards business investment and trade. And I'll speak a little bit about that over the next couple of minutes. So first, I thought I'd talk a little bit about where we've come over the last 2 years. And when you think about the economy over the last 2 years, in April of 2020, we saw an 18.5% decline in GDP. That's 4.5 times as big what we saw during the last largest recession in Canada's history, which is 2008-09, or the 81-82 recession. So we've seen an incredible drop. The good news is that the recovery has been almost as quick as the initial decline. We've seen continued growth since that initial decline, despite a little bit of a hiccup in the late summer as the Delta variant took effect. And then towards the end of this year and into January, as the Omicron shut things down again. As we look forward, I think growth is going to continue to accelerate over the next couple of months, leaving us in good place for a very strong year. When we look at where we are today, GDP is basically where we were prior to the pandemic. The unemployment rate is just below 6%. Which compares to about 5.6% prior to the pandemic. So very good shape after the worst recession in Canada's history. And we're looking at very strong growth, particularly late in the second half of this year. Key to driving that growth is really going to be the labor market. But there's a lot of interesting things going on beneath the surface. When we think back to 2020, the labor market was one of the first things to bounce back. Despite the worst hit and the incredible amount of job losses, 3 million job losses during the pandemic, we saw very strong disposable income growth across Canada. In fact, the strongest income growth in Canada's history. And the reason for that is that we've had such a different labor market depending on individuals. When we see at the bottom, this is the job growth today versus prior to the pandemic for people with different levels of education. And what we saw is people with strong education shifted to working from home, and that's continued to strengthen since the beginning of the pandemic. Employment with people with university degrees is up over 10%. Employment with people with less than a high school degree, that is down almost 20%. So significantly different by level of education. The same situation is on employment prospects for different levels of income. People with lower income, people with kids, particularly single parents, all of those continue to see much worse employment prospects. The good news is that a lot of these people have been helped out with the large government transfers, and that's put us in a much better situation today. Today, we've seen the job market overall, despite some continued unemployment in particular groups, tighten significantly. We've seen rising job vacancies. In fact, the highest job vacancies on record at about 5.5%. London is not far behind the Canadian average, just about 5.4%. This strength in the labor market is really going to continue to fuel consumer spending. It should feed over to stronger wages, particularly in the second half of this year as things continue to tighten. And that's going to really drive this strength in consumer spending. And when we think about the other reasons for strong consumer spending, the thing that strikes me the most is this household savings. So as I mentioned before, right in the middle of the pandemic, we actually saw the strongest growth in real disposable income that we've ever seen in Canada's history at about 9.5%. And that's because we had people in the higher income cohorts continue to do quite well, people with high education shifting to work from home. And then we had this incredible government support. So households actually managed to save $240 billion right through the pandemic into 2020, particularly as they weren't able to spend on things like travel and tourism. And that's continued through to 2021 and continues to be the case right now. As things open up, that pool of money is going to continue to fuel very strong economic growth, particularly over the next 2 years. But when we think about households, it's not to say that there isn't challenges. Households continue to have a large amount of debt. Although they've taken some of that money to pay off credit cards and higher interest debt, they've also taken on much more expensive mortgages. And we all know that interest rates are going to rise, particularly in the second half of this year, and that's going to put some pressure on households. And so when we think about the overall outlook, it's very positive, particularly on the consumer side, But long term, we're going to see slower growth as households are forced to rebalance some of their spending and increase their payments on the debt that they've taken on. And that means that we have to look to other parts of the economy to pick up some of the slack. And the key one that economists tend to point to is the trade sector. And this chart here shows trade exports in energy and non-energy from Canada together with US imports. And the good news is that we've seen very strong growth in our trading partners, particularly in the United States, and that should fuel demand for Canadian products, particularly from places like London. The challenge is that we've seen very strong growth over the last 5 years as well, and we haven't seen really any pickup in our exports outside of energy. In fact, over the last 3 years, we've seen 12% growth in US imports. This is prior to the pandemic, and just 1% growth in US exports. So we have to find a way to improve Canada's export performance over the next couple of years, particularly as the household sector begins to slow. The big question is, can we improve that export performance? And I think the key challenge is the lack of business investment that we've seen in Canada. And driving most of our export performance and business investment over the last decade and a half has really been the energy sector. And this chart here shows investment in the oil and gas sector in Canada and oil prices. And you can see that investment in the oil and gas sector has collapsed with a decline in oil prices. Oil prices have largely recovered, but investment in that sector has not. And there's a number of reasons for that. But really what that means is that we're going to have to shift towards more non-energy if we're going to improve Canada's export performance. And unfortunately, we haven't done much better on the non-energy business investment than we have on the energy side. This is investment as a share of the economy in non-energy in Canada and the US. And you can see that Canada's investment performance has been pretty lackluster. It fell about 11% during the pandemic. It fell again last year. And we're only expecting a slight rebound. But this is really also an opportunity. I think as we look for policies to improve business investment, we can capture some of that very strong demand that we're seeing in our trading partners, and that can really pick up some of the slack. So it's not a foregone conclusion that we'll see weak growth. So just to wrap it up, we expect a very strong economic growth this year. We're calling for 4% despite some hiccups early in the year due to the resurgence in the virus and added shutdowns. But we see growth continuing to accelerate through the second half of this year. It's going to lead us to very strong growth. But as the consumer starts to pay more interest payments on their debt and has to shift to those higher interest rates, the consumer side of the economy is going to slow. And that's really when we have to find policies to address some of that weakening business investment. Otherwise, we're going to look at growth back down towards more the 2% range for Canada. But I think that if we can find those policies and improve some of that business investment, I think we can get growth significantly higher. How does London compare? London is actually doing much better than the Canadian and Ontario average. When we look at things like employment is up well above the Canadian average in London, particularly as they attract stronger immigrants to the region. Employment is up 8% prior to the pandemic, which is significantly better than about just over 1% of the Canadian average. The housing market is also doing better as that strong immigration fuels housing prices. We're not yet seeing it in housing construction, but I think with the strong housing prices, that's likely as well. And commercial construction has definitely been a downward trend across the country as companies adjusted more to shifting from home. London experienced that as well. But London has also taken a different track compared to the rest of the country, where it's been gaining strength over the last number of months, where the rest of the country has been weakening. So when we look at London in particular, I think it's going to continue to outperform the province and the rest of the country this year and into next year. So a positive story although one that is somewhat similar in the overall country. So with that, I'd like to thank you for having me here today. It's certainly an exciting time to study the economy. So thank you.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Robbins, a proud board member of the Chamber and colleague at TD Bank. I have the enviable privilege of extending some gratitude for today's outstanding event. Let me start by thanking Matthew for providing much needed insights into the economy. We appreciate your thoughts, Matthew, on the road to recovery and beyond. Mayor Holder, thank you again for joining us today. We are beyond grateful for your leadership and guidance over the last couple of years in particular. Mandy, you did a great job, and thanks for joining us this morning and moderating the fireside chat. And thank you to our performers, Orlando Valencia and his father, Orlando Sr. It's been truly a pleasure to also thank our London Arts Council for making all of this possible. Before we close today's event with our performers once again, let me tell you about some upcoming events here at the Chamber. First and foremost, nominations are now open for our Business Achievement Awards. The event itself will happen on September the 27th. Our next Business After 5 will be held virtually on February 17th. On April 26th, we will be hosting our annual summit at the Grand Theatre. Information about these events and others can be found on the Chamber's website. So let me end and extend to our virtual audience today a big thank you for joining us. Be well and safe. Thank you so much.
De blue, le pinto de blue, felice. cristal el azul. Piensa que un sueño parecido no volverá más. Que me pintaba la mano, la cara de azul. Y de improviso en el viento rápido me llevo. Y me echaré a volar en el cielo infinito. Volaré, oh, cantaré, oh, oh, oh. De blue, de pinto de blue. Felice di stare lassù. De blue, de pinto de blue. Felice di stare lassù. Rico. Bamba, bamba. Bamba, bamba. Bamba, bamba. Bamba, bamba. Gorilón, gorilón, gorilón. El sombrero me lo quito y me lo pongo. Gorilón, gorilón, gorilón. El sombrero me lo quito y me lo pongo. Bamba, biriri. Thank you. Gracias.